On today's show, the Moza Racing R21 Wheelbase. I'm Shaun Cole, this is the Simpit, and at this point in time we've actually already reviewed 3 different wheelbases from Moza Racing. You've got the R5 at 5 Newton meters, the R9 at 9 Newton meters, then there was the R16 at 16 Newton meters, and today we take a look at the big dog, the big kahuna, the beast that is the R21 at, you guessed it, 21 Newton meters of power. This is the strongest or most powerful wheelbase from Moza, and it retails for $11.99. This wheelbase is part of the Moza Racing ecosystem, meaning it will work with most of the wheel rims that they have available. So 21 Newton meters of power, that is a lot of power. Do you even need that much? Well, stay tuned throughout this show and I will answer that question. The R21 wheelbase does come packaged nicely like all the Moza gear that we've tested before, in its blue and white box with a cutout foam insert holding all of the pieces in place. In the box you will find the needed cables to plug it in, a giant sized power supply. Also included is the needed mounting hardware as well as an Allen wrench to use. Then comes the base. This is a heavy base, coming in at almost 20 pounds, and you will notice it the minute you try pulling it out of the box. The R21 base that I received came in a two-tone black finish with a really nice high gloss finish on the sides and a more of a matte finish along the center top of the base. The overall shape of the case is very unique and has almost a Ferrari or Lamborghini vibe with its lines and cooling vents. It is an elegant piece of art. Along each side are some green and silver graphics, along with a silver Moza R21 logo. The top side has 3 little raised stripes for style with a green sticker on each of them, and then at the front, another Moza logo on top. At the front is a very large and beefy machined gold hub with an NRG style quick release on the end. At the center of that quick release are the electronic connectors for the wireless connection to the Moza wheels. This wheelbase also comes in the orange paint scheme, like the R16 that we tested a while ago. Inside of this case is a robust 21 Newton meter motor that measures in at 262K resolution and is adjustable in rotation anywhere from 90 to 2000 degrees. Like the R16, the R21 wheelbase will also work with the Moza Racing RM dash. That does cost an additional $300, but it just bolts into the shape of the wheel like it was always meant to be there. As you can see, the case or the exterior of the base is the exact same as the R16, and that includes the bottom, which there's a little bit of good and bad to that. Number one, it is the same 4 mounting holes as a Fanatic Podium wheelbase. On the downside, however, is there are no side mounts, so it is a bottom mount only base, but 4 supplied bolts later, it mounts onto any pre-drilled wheel deck. From there, you can plug in the power supply with its 6-pin connector to the base and the supplied USB cable for the computer. At this point, it was time to put on a wheel rim and move on to the software. One of the advantages of having reviewed 3 different Moza wheelbases in recent times is that we have covered the Moza Pit House software in great detail. So I have a link to all 3 of those videos in the description of this show, and I will keep things brief, but you will need to download and install Moza Pit House software. There's also a phone app version for making changes, but for this, I'll be using the PC software in order to make sure my firmware is up to date as well. The Pit House software will first activate your new product, which is 1 click, and from there you can go down to the cloud-looking icon on the left and then click Update for the wheelbase. A few minutes later, the Pit House will have you restart the base and you will be up and running. Clicking on the wheelbase-looking icon on the left will take you to the Settings tab to make adjustments to the wheelbase. It starts out on the Basic Settings tab. Here there are a handful of presets for various driving types that make great starting points. Then there are sliders for a bunch of wheel settings. Each slider has a description of what it does if you hover over them. There are 2 more tabs of settings that you can use here. The Advanced Settings with more sliders, and then the force feedback equalizer tab with up and down sliders showing the frequency of force feedback settings. The last tab is called miscellaneous, and there you can adjust the bump stop strength of the wheel. This is the flagship wheelbase from Moza Racing. It is 21 Newton meters of power and it is $1,200. So the big question is, how does it perform out on track? For my testing, I was going to use two different wheel rims. First of all, I was going to use the FSR wheel rim. This is only 11 inches, 280 millimeters, which means the torque of that 21 Newton meters is really going to have a strong effect on this. And then I was also going to use the new RSV2 round wheel, measuring in at 13 inches or 330 millimeters, which should have a good amount of leverage to control it while driving. I would also be driving a variety of different car types to match, each with varying levels of strength being transmitted into the wheel. The R21 is one of the strongest wheelbases on the market. This means when on full power, it can hurt you if you're not paying attention. For the most part, if you can keep your hands on the wheel, everything will be fine outside of the tremendous workout you'll be getting. But if the moment of a crash or the moment of a wheel wobble from force feedback or a heavy oscillation, you'd better look out if it gets going. It could easily hurt you then. When testing this wheel at maximum or higher forces, there was no notching or detent sensation at all. It was very smooth turning wheel. This doesn't mean that the wheel turns with more friction because of the power. It's just more force from the tires, the steering rack, and the suspension that is being delivered into your hands. It didn't take long for me to decide that I wanted to turn down this beast of a wheel, but driving it with high power really allowed me to get a feel for the overall strength and rigidity of this setup. The extra power had me really wrenching on the wheel, and it just does not flex or wiggle at all. The wheel, the quick release, and the base is so strong, it ends up just testing the strength of my wheel deck. After that extreme punishing workout from the wheel, I decided to turn things down to settings that would be more in the level that I like. I immediately turned the wheel down to about 50% of power, which is probably still a few Newton meters than I prefer, but was a good amount to fairly judge the wheel. The wheel was now much freer to move, but that didn't make it any more or less smooth. It's just that its strength isn't fighting me as much. With that, this wheel has a very good natural feel right out of the gates. It's a great combination of wheel speed and damper combined that I honestly don't have to adjust that much to get comfortable with. With that monster 21 Newton meters behind it, high downforce cars will give you a great sensation of front end grip when heading into the corners. This builds and builds until apex as you start to roll out the wheel, but it can be interrupted by the slightest hint of loss of grip that will lighten the pressure quickly for you to adjust the car. Any extra lateral movement by the car is instantly felt in the wheel, and you can quickly balance against that to control the pendulum that is our car. The wheel is not overly noisy with road noise in terms of force feedback, but that can be dialed up more on the equalizer if desired. I think the area this wheel is different from its little brother, the R16, is when hitting curbs or other moments with big suspension hits that cause the wheel to jerk. That extra power always covers what is needed from the sim and can be dramatic at times. The R21 base with its extra power also ramps up a bit more noticeably than the R16 when it comes to other smaller effects, like the bump you get when you first lock up the brakes. It's a single hit that you have to be sensitive to. It doesn't just keep shaking with them locked up. It's just an initial hit. But when you feel it, it allows you to make the correction needed to perfect your driving. The Moza Racing R21 Wheelbase does a great job of switching from light and smooth feeling when running down the straights to loading up to whatever desired strength you need it to be. Despite its larger internal inertia, it wasn't plagued by too much moving mass. That meant that I still needed to dial in a little bit of damping for the most comfort. I also really enjoyed the wireless connection of the wheel rims, so there was no wraparound with either of the wheel rims that I was testing. The FSR wheel rim felt really good in open wheels and in GT3 cars, and of course the RS, the giant 13-inch wheel rim, felt at home with a Miata or anything oval or in the dirt. So the wheel rims round out the base nicely. Another great feature is the NRG style 10 bearing quick release, which is super solid and easy to operate. On top of that, the smaller shape of the base for a monster powered wheel like this allowed me to tuck it under my monitors better than many other wheelbases of this power, and on top of that, it just looks so darn cool and unique in its styling. Well, that tells you pretty much everything that you need to know about the Moza Racing R21 Wheelbase, but to make it perfectly clear, we'll break it down with the good, the not so good, and the bottom line, starting off with the good, and that being, it's a very powerful wheelbase. Great looking base. Wireless wheel connection. Nice construction and finish. Good force feedback. Very smooth turning wheel. Nice software control of effects. Compact base, much smaller than most. No flex, base, shaft, quick release, wheel rim. Fits Fanatic 4-bolt pattern. Really cool quick release. And now on to the not so good. Bottom mount only. Relatively expensive. Only a few rims to choose from. Moza ecosystem. And now on to the bottom line. Let's start things off with being relatively expensive. I think that's only because the amount of options that we have in today's market, even from Moza. You've got the R5, the R9, and even the R16 coming in at a substantially lower price. So it's just that over $1,000 range that I think it gets to the point where we're relatively expensive. If you're measuring things by Newton meters, the closest comparison would be the SimMagic Alpha Ultimate at 23 Newton meters for $1,129. Whereas we're looking at 21 Newton meters for $1,199 here. Earlier in the show, I did pose the question, do you even need 21 Newton meters of power? Running this wheel at full strength is really only the kind of level of strength that certain people need for very specific reasons. Perhaps they're trying to mimic the forces of a specific racing car that they drive or dream of driving. Or perhaps they're literally strength training via sim racing, turning up the wheel to higher than real levels to help their endurance in sim racing or in real life racing. Or maybe it's just an ego thing. It's bigger, therefore it must be better. No matter what, it's hard to beat the Moza Racing R21 when it comes to styling. It is a beautiful wheelbase, and if you are building a rig and the overall look is important to you, well, this is the best looking wheelbase on the market, hands down, and it comes in black or orange. I will say that I'm very impressed with the overall quality and construction of the Moza gear that I've tested so far. I also like the impressive lineup that they put together in a short amount of time. On top of that, they've really come in at a wide variety of price points for different levels of sim racing, which is very cool as well. So thank you, Moza, for that, and you can check them out at mozaracing.com. Be sure to thumbs up this show if you like what we did. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can find out when our next video comes out. And most of all, thank you for watching. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.